Hello and welcome back to the Cellblock Scorch. This is Octo. I won this week 228A, with the prompt, I just feel like I can trust you, and then in parentheses, they are wrong. Bones gave us this prompt, and I thought it was really fun, so I'm really happy that I won with this piece. I'm pretty pleased with what I did. It's part of a larger universe that hasn't been on the Scorch yet, so I will explain some things afterward that will hopefully clear some stuff up. If not, you will just live in eternal mystery until I eventually get my life together to write it all the way out. So without further ado, I will read my Scorch, which is titled Trusting. I just feel like I can trust you, you know. Must be something about your face. Janie smiled vapidly at Artemis, the actual goddess of the hunt and other things that he was a little unclear about, then made panicked eye contact with Eunomia when Artemis turned away to grab a new jug of wine. Eunomia grimaced and gave Janie a thumbs up, but otherwise didn't intercede. She glanced off to the side, eyes wide with surprise, then bustled off with one last encouraging gesture in his direction. Gee, thanks, Nomi. That was super helpful. When Artemis turned back, Janie snapped his attention back to her face and semi-awkwardly tucked a lock of his curly dark hair behind his ear, smiling like his life depended on it. Because it did. Ha, really? I've just got one of those faces, I guess. So, what brings a cute little nymph like you to my corner of Olympus? I'm sure I would have remembered seeing you around here before. Artemis suddenly leaned forward and adjusted her tunic in such a way that displayed the rather magnificent tooth of some sort of enormous creature dangling from a leather cord around her neck. She'd doubtlessly slain the beast herself with minimum effort. Janie idly envisioned how she was going to display his teeth if she figured out what was happening. Maybe she'd make them into a tiara, or stud them in knuckle dusters and summarily beat him to death. I've got a few friends that swear by your wine, figured I should try it out. Where did Loki go? What was she doing? And how did Janie, the only one in their thrice-cursed trio that currently identified as male, end up as the one that was left to distract Artemis in the center of her sacred domain where men were emphatically not allowed? Janie visualized how Loki'd been gazing longingly at Eunomia for the last month or two and tried his best to replicate it in Artemis's direction. So far it seemed to be working. Maybe. Janie wasn't exactly an expert at this whole flirting thing, and especially not when he was lady-shaped. How do you like my wine, then, little nymph? Artemis leaned forward conspiratorially with a grin and whispered, Is it better than that stuff Denny stocks? Don't worry, I won't tell. Having never tasted Dionysus's wine, Janie just smiled enigmatically and tried to hide his entire face behind his goblet while giggling nervously. He craved death. He was never listening to Loki ever again. He was supposed to be the one rifling through Artemis's armory in search of an arrow, or dagger, or whatever other weapon that was made of pure moonlight or star beams or some rot, and Loki was supposed to be outrageously flirting to keep the goddess distracted. She was actually good at it, and Janie was actually good at thieving things from gods, and it was going to be perfect. Of course, Artemis had snatched him up as soon as they'd followed Eunomia into the monthly full moon revelry. Of course. And Loki had just blown him a kiss and disappeared like the useless heathen she was. Aw, don't be shy. Artemis reached forward and gently pressed his goblet down until it was on the table and out of his face. He bit back a grimace and let her pat at his hand without dramatically shrieking and leaping backward like he really, really wanted to. Come on, let me introduce you to the girls. I'm sure they'd be delighted to meet you, Janie. The very last thing he wanted to do was surround himself with more potentially murderous women. How long did this shape-changing spell last again? More importantly, could Artemis smell gender? It seemed like something a goddess ought to be able to do. Janie took a bracing swig of his wine, surprisingly excellent, actually, and smiled maniacally with just a few too many teeth. Sure, whatever you want. Through a combination of pretending he was very stupid, and actually being stupid enough to blatantly and repeatedly lie to a goddess, Janie managed to keep Artemis occupied until someone came to extract him. It mainly involved dishing out a lot of dirt on the various gods, goddesses, creatures, and mortals he'd been stealing outrageously from, interacting with, over the last few months. He might have been getting too involved, because he was so deeply embroiled in listening to a pretty water nymph complain about the things she had to put up with from Poseidon, that he completely missed Eunomia trying to flag him down from across the room. He nearly jumped out of his skin when Eunomia appeared directly behind him and clapped a hand on his shoulder with more force than strictly necessary. She muttered something about how they really did need to get going, Missy, sorry, and extracted him from the scrum of nymphs that were braiding his hair and adorning him with flowers he'd never seen in his life before, while gossiping outrageously. He waved awkwardly at them, promised to visit some day soon, like a liar, probably, then sketched a short bow at Artemis and dashed off with Eunomia. At least he could count on someone in this wretched world to have his back. Loki met them at the gilded entrance of the hall and quietly swept him and Eunomia back to the mortal realm with a wave of her hand. "That went better than expected," she remarked, glancing around to make sure they were alone in the little cabin they'd taken as their base of operations. Convinced of their security, she turned and fixed a ghoulish grin on Janey, who scowled mutinously back at her. "I didn't know you could be such a charmer, Janey. I'm impressed." Janey just scoffed and began tugging hairpins out of his meticulously coiffed hair. Eunomia hissed at him. "Janey, it took me forever to get your hair to sit right. Couldn't you let it stay for at least an hour?" "He's allergic to class, darling. Don't hold it against him." Loki leaned gracefully out of range of Janey's irritable swat. "Oh, don't be like that. It worked, didn't it?" Janey didn't dignify that with a response beyond flicking hairpins at the both of them. He actually hadn't minded the whole shape-shifting experience. Didn't make much of a difference to him. But it was the principle of the thing. "I was actually afraid we'd been had when she walked up to you. Missy can usually sense a guy at 30 paces, Eunomia earnestly informed him, gathering the hairpins up with a flick of her hand and tucking them into her pockets. "I guess you're a little more in touch with your feminine side than we thought." Janey did not have time to unpack that statement. He'd spent nigh on 900 years in this wretched world avoiding any form of self-contemplation, and by the gods, he wasn't about to start now. "Shut up, Lo," he growled preemptively. "This is your fault." Loki held up her hands in surrender with a chuckle. Maybe. But look on the bright side. If she ever meets you in your true form, she found you amusing enough that she probably won't skin you alive. "Yeah, she'll just run me through for stealing her magic knife." Ginny flopped into an armchair and rubbed his temples. "If she murders me, you owe me one of your stupid golden apples." "Seems fair," Loki said, and smiled slightly. "How do you feel about a repeat performance next month? I saw a quiver of arrows in her armory that I'm just dying to get a hold of." 2 separate pillows smacked into Loki's head, cutting her off quite handily.
Hey, it's Bones with Judge Comments. So this week I got submissions from Octo, Styx, and Safety Matches, and they were all great. Styx and Octo both used the prompt in a humorous manner, which, as I said last time, I was hoping for because I'm a coward about this type of plotline used dramatically. Styx's was really funny in a far more real-world type of way, and I would absolutely suggest reading it. But Octo wrote about Janey, and I love Janey. He is part of a big universe that I'm sure she'll explain more about in the comments, but basically, I adore Janey and Loki and their relationship as 2 horrible creatures messing up the universe together. This piece in particular is just a prime example of Octo being a master of humor in absurdity, with a nice sprinkling of fridge horror and hints of secret trauma, which is the best type of humor in my opinion. So, through a combination of this piece just being hilarious and me already knowing and loving the characters, I really had no choice but to choose it, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Anyway, I'll turn it back to Octo to explain more.
Well, there it was. I hope you had fun with that. It's a nice, fun little jaunt. So this prompt was really fun because I actually know why Bones gave it. I know what they were thinking of, the story specifically. And so I actually had to make sure that I wasn't just, stealing their ideas. So what I did instead is I fell back upon the fact that I had this whole universe fleshed out with this little guy called Janey and his 2 friends, Loki and Eunomia, as they attempt to go around stealing crap from various pantheons. And I won, so they must have liked it. This particular expanded universe is tagged as Liar Liar on the Patreon. There will be more stuff from it because I write a lot about Janie. Fun fact, he's just kind of been kicking around in my brain since, like, high school. We've been together for a while. But only kind of recently did I actually put him in his own story. And his own story is sort of what you saw here. There's not a lot of technical plot happening here. It doesn't really tell you anything about the world. Beyond dropping some vaguely alarming things like Janie has been around for like 900 years. He's friends with Loki, who is a Norse goddess currently, because she's a she right now, and Eunomia, who is actually a Greek goddess of justice. And we don't know how that happened, because I'm not going to tell you. But, essentially, all you really need to know about Janie is that he is immortal, and he's mad about it, and it's not his fault, but he can't fix it. And the basis of this whole entire plot is that the apocalypse is coming, because the world ends cyclically. Because I say so. And Janie, being not so newly immortal, but new enough, has realized that he just might not die with the rest of everybody else if the world ends, and so has become deeply invested in stopping the apocalypse, so that he doesn't just float in the nothingness of life for the rest of forever. In doing so, he manages to recruit Loki, who is very disillusioned with being alive at this point, because at the beginning of the story he's a he. He's just, been around for thousands of years, tired, and through various trials and tribulations and running into Janie repeatedly over the course of centuries, he eventually is convinced to help with the scheme of stopping the apocalypse. Then they pick up Eunomia, who originally is working for the people who want to start the apocalypse for various reasons that I will not currently get into, maybe the next time I read something about this. And we pick her up, and that's when things start going a little pear-shaped for the people trying to apocalypse stuff, because now we have a trio, and as we know, trios are more powerful than duos. The point of this Scorch is that they're just stealing some crap from the goddess of the moon in order to stop the apocalypse from happening somehow. I'm not quite sure how. I'm sure it's important later. But it's a fun time. There's a lot of inherent drama in this universe that you don't really get to see here because it's just a funky little time. Because Janie at the base is a funky little guy who wants to do funky little guy things. And the only reason he ever deviates from this path is if somebody forces him to. Which, tragically for him, happens a lot. I hope you like him. I like him. And, oh yeah, so, fun fact that I think is funny. This actually comes up in a Scorch that I wrote before this, but I didn't win that week, so you probably won't hear it, so I'll just tell you here. So Loki, as I said earlier, switches to being a lady, because Loki, is a shapeshifter, okay? They can do whatever they want with their gender. And what they want to do currently is be a woman, because when they first interacted with Eunomia, they decided that Eunomia was the most beautiful woman that they'd ever seen in their life, and they wanted to flirt with her. But Eunomia is a raging lesbian, and shut him down, because he was a he at the time, quite thoroughly. And then, to her horror, Loki transformed into a beautiful Valkyrie woman, like, right before her eyes, becoming the most attractive person that Eunomia had ever seen, and Eunomia has been mad about it ever since. But unfortunately for me, that is not the main purpose of this story. The main purpose of the story is actually action-adventure, whatever shenaniganry, stopping the apocalypse, stopping evil pantheon gods, whatever things. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this. I could go into the deep lore and, like, every single plot point of what's going on, but I don't think you want to hear that, and honestly, I probably shouldn't, because it'll be incoherent right now, unless I write it down. So I hope you enjoyed this little glance into the universe of Liar Liar, and you can look forward to more of that later. Hopefully, I think so. Maybe not soon, but at some point, I'm pretty sure I won't with Janie again. So, keep your eyes peeled, or ears peeled. Keep something peeled for that. And don't forget to go check out the Patreon, and also go vote for us on that podcast platform thing that Bone set up for us, because they're super cool. The prompt for next week that I gave in response to winning this Scorch is regrettable sidewalk chalk art, and Rev won that one. I can neither remember why I used the prompt nor why Rev won, so I will go read those and tell you why next time you hear from me. So until that time, keep that fire burning.
The Cellblock Scorch is a production of Stellacore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. We can be reached at thestellacore@gmail.com, through comments on your podcast platform of choice, our Instagram, Stella_core, and at our YouTube, also called Stellacore. Feel free to check out our other productions on our YouTube channel or our cosplays on Instagram. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon, linked in the show notes. There, you can access the winning Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month to gain access to all of the Scorch submissions.